Tyler from Aspire Sports, and I'm going to be giving you my first Hunk and Junk segment here. So, Hunk from Dr. Steve Brule, if you know who he is, Adult Swim had a show, John C. Riley. It was really funny. Check it out. But we got some hunks here that I like this week, and then some junk plays that are, I think, going to be like duds. They're just not going to be solid plays. So if you have any questions on who to start or sit, leave it in the comments below. We'll answer any questions you have, and let's go ahead and get into it. So my first hunk here, my first hunk play is going to be Tua Tagovailoa. Is that how I say it? First time I'm really trying to say his name on camera because it's hard to say. So hopefully I got it right. If I didn't, let me know. But I think he's going to be a really good play this week. It's the Chargers, who are giving up the fourth most fantasy points to the quarterback position this year. They have one of the lowest pressure rates as well. So I think he's going to have a good opportunity here to have a pretty solid week. I think he's a top 10 play this week, in my opinion. So let's go to the next, and that's going to be Drew Lock. Drew Lock this week gets the Raiders, right? And I think the past couple of weeks here haven't been that bad, and I think this week against the Raiders, who also have one of the lowest pressure rates in the NFL, I think Drew Lock is a borderline top 12 play this week, especially because the secondary for the Raiders as well isn't really anything to write home about, and he has pretty good options here. So I think he's a borderline top 12 play this week. Let's go into running back. Running back Chase Edmonds. Now this depends on Kenyon Drake. If Kenyon Drake doesn't play this week, I think Chase Edmonds is honestly like a borderline top 3 play this week at the running back position. Last week it wasn't that great, but he saw 28 touches, 28 touches in a game against Miami, who honestly have a pretty decent run game. But this week it's Buffalo have been getting beat on the ground this year. So I think as long as if he would have fallen in the end zone last week, he would have been a top 3 play at the running back position last week. So I think he's a solid play, seeing plenty of volume if Kenyon Drake is out. If Kenyon Drake's out. And I think he will because they have a game on Thursday night, so I don't think Kenyon Drake plays. Next, James Conner. I know he let a lot of fantasy managers down last week after his really ideal matchup. Ideal matchup, but was a dud, right? Totally let him down. So, but this week, get Cincinnati, and I think Pittsburgh just comes out, and I think they demolish Cincinnati this week. I think he's going to be a big reason why they just are going to be able to control the run game against the Bengals, the fronts against the Bengals offensively and defensively. So I think he's going to go out and show that he's an RB1, and he puts up RB1 numbers this week. And let's get into the next one here, and that's going to be J.K. Dobbins. Last week, he outsnapped Gus Edwards by 12 snaps. Now, this largely depends on Mark Ingram being out. If he's out once again, I do like J.K. Dobbins. They said last week they're going to get him more involved going forward, and he outsnapped Gus Edwards. This week gets against the Patriots, who are bottom 10 in terms of run defense this year. So I think he's a pretty solid play this week. I think he's like a borderline top 20 play this week, in my opinion. Let's go to the next one. That's going to be Terry McLaurin. Now, a bit obvious, but I do see a lot of people kind of worried about Alex Smith. Don't be worried. Like this dude, right now, I'm not going to get too dorky into all these really, really deep stats, but in terms of air yards for his team, he's only behind Devontae Adams in terms of air yards. That means he's seeing the ball. Like most targets on his team, the ball all over the field, not just short and intermediate, but also deep. So he's somebody who I just think is a plug and play top 10 option every single week. And I think once again, he's that against a defense in Detroit that's not very good as well. He's going to see probably Desmond Trufant in shadow coverage, and Desmond Trufant isn't good. So I think he's a very solid play this week. Let's get into the next one. That's going to be Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy's the past 2 weeks since they moved him out of the slot and put him outside, put KJ Hamler in the slot. He's been a stud. And I think that's going to continue this week against the Raiders, who I've already kind of talked about with Drew Lock, who haven't been that good against the pass this year. So I think he's a really solid option this week. He's a top 20 play, borderline top 15 play in my opinion this week. So start. He's a hunk. Next one, Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk this week. Who else is left for San Francisco, right? Yes, they had Richie James go off last week, but I also saw a stat that was like Richie James had, I think it was like 150 yards after the catch, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean that's still yards, but still that's not going to happen again. Brandon Aiyuk, Jerry Rice came out and said that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be a great player. If you have Jerry Rice, the best wide receiver to play this game. Come out and say that about you. I think that says a lot about the player that you're going to be. It's a bit of a tougher matchup, but also who is left? There's going to be no Kendrick Bourne, no Debo. Kittle's gone. So I just think who's left, and I think he's a really good player, like a good football player. So I think he's a borderline top 20 play this week. And let's get into the next one. That's going to be TJ Hockenson. TJ Hockenson did not practice yesterday. So got to keep an eye on it, but if he does, I do like him a lot this week. Plays Washington, who I've talked about this before as well. Jonathan Bostic in coverage is no good. He's terrible. And right now, no Kenny Galladay is looking like as well. So he's been a top 3 fantasy tight end, putting up really solid numbers, and I think he's a really good play this week as long as he can go. Let's go to the next one. That's going to be Mike Gesicki. Now, this has been somebody who's like hit or miss, mostly miss on the season, but no Preston Williams this week. This is also a team, the Los Angeles Chargers, who are giving up the 8th most fantasy points at the tight end position, and they have some linebackers who can't cover against the tight end. So I think this is going to be a pretty good week for Mike Gesicki this week. I don't think he's going to have a massive week like he's done, against Buffalo, but I think it's going to be a solid top near borderline top 5 play at the tight end position this week. Now let's go into my junk here, my junk, and I don't want to say junk because they're not. You should get rid of them or not consider starting them, but I just think people that are going to put up dud performances, and that's first one's going to be Josh Allen. Oh, but he almost scored nearly 40 points last week against the worst secondary, one of the worst secondaries in the league, on the road, going cross from West Coast to East Coast, playing a 1 o'clock game. No, don't believe it. They also have one of the lowest pressure rates in the NFL. Seattle does. Now they're traveling from East Coast to West Coast to play an Arizona team who has one of the highest pressure rates in the NFL. I think they're going to get after him. I don't think he's going to have a good week this week. He's going to put up these numbers, which he was putting up against better defenses. And I think this week he will put up borderline, I'd say like quarterback 2 numbers this week. So if you're expecting a big week, I don't think it's going to happen this week. The next one's going to be Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert this week is, well, not this week, this season has been one of the hottest names in fantasy in terms of the quarterback position, right? Everybody's big on Justin Herbert, but I think this week he plays a very good Miami secondary, a much better and improved Miami defense, going cross coast once again from West Coast to East Coast. I don't think this is a good matchup. I honestly would not be surprised if he puts up his lowest points on the season this week. I just don't think he's a good start this week. Next one, Mike Davis. I know a lot of people are really excited if you have Mike Davis. You should probably play him, but if you have better options, I'd consider it. I mean, look at these past 3 games without McCaffrey. It was slowly getting worse and worse. And I think this week is going to be a really tough matchup against Tampa Bay, who Tampa Bay's, I know they got embarrassed against New Orleans, but that's New Orleans. New Orleans aren't the Carolina Panthers. I think this week they play pissed off, and I think they get after Teddy Bridgewater. Yes, PPR leagues, I think Mike Davis is going to be a pretty solid play, but in standard, I don't think he's going to have that many yards, so I don't think he's going to be that good of an option this week. Next, and the next one here is going to be Darrell Henderson. Now, this depends on if he even plays, but really it goes for all of the backs for the Rams. I just think this is a really tough matchup against Seattle, who Seattle right now is giving up the 3rd least rushing yards in the NFL. And then they also have Snack Harrison coming back on the season this year. So one of the better run defenders in the league coming in for this game against, already for a defense that's really good against the run. So I just don't expect big numbers here, and I would look elsewhere. I think these guys are honestly like outside the top 20 in my opinion. So unless they get a touchdown, touchdowns are incredibly difficult to predict. But based upon yardage, I think they're outside of the top 20 this week. Next, let's go to wide receivers in Minnesota. So right now, Minnesota has the least passing attempts on the season. They play at one of the slowest rates for any NFL team this year. So you have both of those things on top of a defense that is giving up the 3rd least fantasy points to the wide receiver position this year. I honestly think both these guys, unless they have a big reception or touchdown, are borderline outside of the top 20 as well. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. It's just not a good matchup. This is a team that likes to run the ball. I don't think they're going to really even be able to run the ball. I expect this to be just an ugly type of game, and I don't want. If you have better options, I would go with the other options over than Thielen and Jefferson. Next, let's talk about all the receivers from Cincinnati. This is crazy. This is like one of the biggest percentages I've seen on Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus this week has the Bengals as a minus 103 103% disadvantage in pass protection this week against the Steelers. That is crazy. I've never seen anything that high. So they're going to get after Joe Burrow. I expect Pittsburgh, and he's just not going to have time. If you're going to play one of these receivers, I think it's going to be Boyd over the rest of them just because he's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quick. Sure, T. Higgins could catch a big pass, and I know that the Steelers haven't been that good against the wide receiver position this year, but I think this is going to be like one of those statement games. Pittsburgh playing a divisional opponent. I don't like any of these options. I'd go elsewhere as well. And Mark Andrews for tight end. He's been not very good this season. He's had really tough matchups to say the least, really. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. This week plays the team that's given up the second least points to the tight end position. So I think this week is just another dud performance. He scored under 5 points 5 times this year. I think he's going to do that again this week unless he falls into the end zone. So tight end's really tough because there aren't many options out there. So it's really, you hope for the best, you play him. But if you have like a TJ Hockenson, I would play him over Mark Andrews for sure. And the last one here is going to be Austin Hooper. And I know I've been talking up Austin Hooper, but this is one thing you have to consider. Right now in Cleveland for Sunday, it is supposed to be 50 degrees, raining, and over 30-mile-an-hour winds. The last I checked is 33-mile-an-hour winds. No, thank you. Like that happened last time in Cleveland when I think it was the Raiders and Cleveland played each other, and it was not a good fantasy day for the passing game on both sides. So I think the same here. I think you downgrade, not just Austin Hooper, but everybody in this game, even on the Houston side, because I just don't think they're going to be able to throw the ball effectively. Of course, the weather could possibly change, but it's something to keep your eye on heading into Sunday. So with that being said, if you have any other questions, who to start, who to sit, leave it in the comments below. We'll answer any questions you have. If you haven't, hit that like button, subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.